This is Tiki ASMR. Tiki. And today I just wanted to do a little bit of a movie review dump for the last 3 to 4 weeks. And I have some gum, so I'll do some gum chewing while I talk as well. But yeah, I was feeling a little bit tired after work and figured I haven't done a review for movies in a little bit, so I'll just give my thoughts on the new Superman movie, the F1 movie, and then the sequel or like legendary sequel of I Know What You Did Last Summer. So I'll put some gum in. And for the reviews, I'll include timestamps for them as well. So if you wanted to just look at like one of the movies or 2 of the movies, I'll put timestamps in the description for you as well, and then maybe the comment section too. But for the movies, I'll do probably spoiler free for at least F1 and Superman, because I don't think there's really too much to spoil or really get into in depth for them, but they're definitely both pretty good movies, so I'll just give my thoughts on them. And then for I Know What You Did Last Summer, I will do some spoilers because it's kind of like a horror whodunit movie, and I have a lot stronger thoughts on this movie as well. So yeah, so I think we can we'll start with the Superman movie, which I think is probably my favorite of the 3. And I think everyone kind of knows the general plot or idea of Superman, but you know, Superman, he's like a Clark Kent is a journalist in Metropolis, and he's protecting Metropolis as the city away from supervillains and monsters and creatures and stuff. And this specific Superman was directed by James Gunn, who I really like. I'm a big fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and James Gunn directed all 3 of those, and I've liked all of those. So I didn't actually know that the Superman movie was directed by him until it started, and I immediately got James Gunn vibes, and I was like, oh, I think I'll like this, and I actually really did. So the Superman movie, so starting with just some of the actors and acting, David Gordon Sweat's the new Superman, and I think he does a really good job. I think all the Supermans recently have done a pretty good job, but I think David Gordon Sweat did a really good job as Superman, and was a really good balance of not just Superman, but also Clark Kent, and how those 2 are slightly different while still connected. I also really liked the actor that played Mr. Terrific in the movie, who's one of like the side superheroes in the film. His name is Eddie Gathegi, I think. Gathegi. I think it's Gathegi, but he was really good in it as well as Mr. Terrific. And then Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, I thought did a really good job. And I think Lex Luthor as a character is always a fun character, and this movie does him justice of making him like smart but still flawed, and also just incredibly ruthless. There's a couple scenes where he's like incredibly ruthless that you don't always get from like superhero like villains. He's like actually pretty ruthless and pretty violent at times, so I thought Nicholas Hoult did a good job as well. And then Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. I think of those four, she was probably, I don't want to say the weakest actor, but maybe the least developed character of the four. And I think she was still fine. I think she wasn't a nice addition to the movie. I think she did a good job overall, but of those bigger characters that I really liked, I'd say she was the one that I was probably least invested in, from a character standpoint at least. But characters aside, I think that this film was just like incredibly beautifully shot, and I think that some of the visuals in it are like really stunning. There's a couple scenes that take place in like I think they call it a dimension rift, and the visuals in those scenes are really pretty and really well done. And then I also just love there's probably like 5 or 6 scenes with the super dog, Crypto, and the dog kind of reminded me of my dog, so if you imagine like a dog that's a good dog but not the most well behaved, and then you gave him superpowers, that's exactly what the dog in this film was like. So, but yeah. And then the other thing that I liked about this is similar to Guardians of the Galaxy and other James Gunn movies. I think that the humor in the movie was very well balanced with the serious moments and the more brutal moments. I thought the balance was pretty good overall. Some superhero movies are like too goofy for me, or like too silly for what's going on. So like, one that comes to mind is Thor: Love and Thunder. I really didn't like, because I felt like it was too goofy and too silly. And superhero movies should be fun, but some of them are too goofy. Whereas I think this one was effective in balancing the humor and the seriousness. So yeah, I think DC could learn a couple things from this movie. I thought it was a really good job. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's really good, and I think it's incredibly watchable. And a lot of the minor characters are engaging and intriguing, in addition to the main 3 characters of Lois Lane, Superman, and Lex Luthor. I think the smaller characters all have personality and are engaging as well. So yeah, I think overall I gave Superman a 4.5 out of 5. A 4.5 out of 5. So I really liked it, and I think it's worth seeing in theaters. I thought they did a really good job with the new Superman movie. So yeah. And then moving on to F1. So F1, the description for F1 is: racing legend Sonny Hayes is coaxed out of retirement to lead a struggling Formula One team and mentor a young hotshot driver while chasing one more chance at glory. And it is directed by Joseph Kosinski and features Brad Pitt. And I liked F1 a lot too. And I will emphasize that I'm not really like a racing person. I don't really follow like NASCAR, F1, Formula One racing, or anything like that. So I was a little bit hesitant to watch it, but they actually did a really good job of making it like informed enough where those types of fans that do watch NASCAR, do watch racing, do watch Formula One can enjoy the movie, but also it's like dumbed down enough where if you don't follow that, you understand what's going on still. And then in this, I think the leading cast, all did a really good job in this as well. Brad Pitt crushes it. I think Brad Pitt does a really good job in most of his movies, but I really liked him in this as like an older character coming out of retirement who's kind of like a wild card or like a loose cannon. Damson Idris plays the younger Formula One driver and his partner, and I thought he did a good job as well. And his dynamic with his mom in the movie, their two characters, I think, worked really well together. And then the owner of the Formula One team is Javier Bardem, and I thought he did a really good job as well. He just comes across as very likable, very relatable, of a guy kind of in like trying to solve a problem that feels unsolvable in a way. And Javier Bardem, I think, does really good in his limited role. And then one of my favorite characters is actually Carrie Condon, who plays like the love interest and the engineer of the Formula One car that they're driving. So Carrie Condon, I think, really crushes it. She's so like cute and likable, and it was just a really good love interest for Brad Pitt that could like hold her own on screen and is a very strong character as well. And then Brad Pitt and Damson Idris, I think, play off each other really well too. So overall acting for the F1 movie, I think, works really well. And I also felt like the dialogue, the dialogue can get a little bit cheesy, but I think overall the script, I think, was pretty strong, and I think that the pacing felt really good. So the F1 movie was 156 minutes, so that's what, 2 hours and 36 minutes, which seems kind of long when you're just like, wow, 2 hours and 36 minutes. But I think the dialogue and the script and the directing all makes the pacing feel pretty good for the movie. And it didn't feel like it was super long. There's a couple spots where maybe it dragged a little bit, but overall I think it was pretty good. And then I do think that a couple complaints is even the runtime is just, I'd say, a tad long. I think overall the pacing's good, but maybe just a tad long. And I do think there's a couple relationships that feel underdeveloped. So even though I thought that Brad Pitt and Damson Idris played well off of each other, I do feel like certain dynamics of the relationship were underdeveloped, and there could have been a couple moments taken out and a couple moments put more towards that specific relationship, to make the payoff in the end a little bit more rewarding. So I'd say outside of a couple like silly moments that I was like, okay, like I see why it's there, but it's not really for me. And then a couple relationships that felt underdeveloped. Outside of those, I think it's a pretty fun ride, and I think it's I think it does justice to the genre overall. So I wouldn't say it's anything groundbreaking, but there's really not a whole lot of like racing movies, and I think this does a good job. I also think the ending was somewhat predictable, so I wasn't like surprised by a lot of the stuff that happened, but overall I still really liked it, so I gave that a 4 out of 5. And now for the third movie, which I will get into some spoilers, is I Know What You Did Last Summer, which is like a legacy sequel that plays off of the mid to late 1990s movies I Know What You Did Last Summer and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, that had Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. in both of those, and now they come back as different or same characters but much older in this rendition of the 2025 version. So I did not like this movie. I'll be straightforward, honest with it. I didn't really like it at all. If you are a big fan of the first couple, like, you can definitely go see this, but I'll be getting into spoilers here, so if you want to see it, more power to you. I think it, isn't for me, but there are definitely some people that did enjoy it. Essentially, the premise of this movie, for anyone that hasn't seen the original, is that a group of friends accidentally kill someone in a deadly car accident, and then they like hide it, they cover it up. But then a year later, the following summer, they start to get notes that say like, I know what you did last summer, you can't run from the past, that sort of like ominous letters. And then they start getting killed off by this horror character, the fisherman, that wears like a slicker, and has like a hook and like a harpoon gun. So they start getting hunted down and killed off by this fisherman. And it's like a whodunit, so you don't really know like who the killer is, or you're not supposed to know who the killer is. But that was one of my issues, is I pretty much knew, who the killer was going to be very early on, based on some poor script writing, and some poor dialogue choices, in my opinion. But starting off with a couple of positives, just to, let you know I didn't hate everything, but I do think it was cool to see the town that's like a lot more modern now, where it used to be like strictly like a fishing type town, but now it's like a lot more modern, a lot more rich, a lot more like real estate focused, with like nicer lake houses and stuff. But they still called back to and visited some of the old locations and some of the old set pieces, which I thought was cool. And then it is cool to see Jennifer Love Hewitt and Prince Jr. back in the roles, and they actually did a little bit more than I expected. Some other like legacy sequel movies have people back in them, but they really don't do that much. In this legacy sequel, they do a lot. They just don't do necessarily what I want them to do, / what I think they should be doing in a legacy sequel. So I did like to see them, but I don't think it was executed the best. And that's about where my praise ends. Actually, there were, I think, the first kill in the movie and one kill later on were both well done and interesting. So I think the first fisherman kill and a fisherman kill later on in the movie were both pretty good as well. So those are some of the positives. But there's a lot of negatives. So, like, starting with the script, I think the script and dialogue just seem very sloppy and clunky, and a lot of like tell don't show. So we always talk about, or like movies always talk about how good movies show don't tell. Like, the audience is smart, they'll put the pieces together. But in this movie, there's a lot of like tell don't show of characters literally just talking about their backstory. Of like, oh yeah, I used to date him, but I'm nervous about going to see him. It's like, you don't have to have the character do that. It just is poor dialogue, in my opinion. And then the other things that I didn't like is the lead characters are not just underdeveloped, in my opinion, but they're also just not likable. The two main characters, the two like lead girls, are Danica and Ava. And I think Danica is like, one, not a good person and just kind of annoying, but also she just feels very like infantile and childish throughout the entire movie and very like goofy and silly, and it almost comes across like she's more like of a spoof of a character rather than a real character in a horror movie. And like, you know, she's with Teddy, one of the characters, over the summer when the accident happens, and then she's engaged to someone else less than a year later. And it's like, okay, like that was really quick. Like, you know, I don't think that's a very normal thing. And then just her like attempt at humor, or her humor throughout, the tone just didn't fit at all. And I think she's just very like unlikable and unrealistic as a character. And then Ava, the other main character, you just really don't get a lot of context about her. Like, she's built up to be like the main character that you're following, but she's like the least developed of the characters, in my opinion, and the least interesting of all of them. So I didn't really like our main cast. I think Tyreek Withers, who plays Teddy, was probably the most complex or the most interesting, but his character choices, in the plot, he also just does incredibly dumb, unrealistic things that don't make sense. So even though there's some positives there, there's a lot of negatives that cover that up too. So I also just don't buy one of the main themes is talking about how trauma can change you, which I agree with. Trauma can change people, but one of the legacy characters, Ray, is like a hero in the first two films, and one of the main people that you cheer for, or like want to root for. And then in this, he ends up being one of the killers, which I just think is a terrible choice because you're kind of like ruining the character. There's a world where this could have been done really well, and you're like, oh wow, trauma really did get to him. Like, his reasoning, his motivation for turning into one of the fisherman killers in this movie makes sense, but that wasn't executed well enough in this movie for it to work, and I think it really ruins the character in the first couple films, because the motivation didn't make sense to me, and the reveal didn't make sense to me either. You get this like very loose backstory of him and Julie's characters got divorced and they aren't on good terms anymore, but you don't really figure out as to why or what happened. You're just meant to be like, oh, I guess they just hate each other now, which I think was just, once again, poor writing. But then his reasoning for turning into the fisherman like killer with Stevie, another character of one of the younger characters, is that like they ruined her life, and they tried to like, the town tried to erase what happened to them, and I just don't buy that those things would lead to Ray, who was the hero in the first two, becoming like a serial killer, just killing random people that weren't even involved. Like, the second kill of the movie was perhaps my least favorite for like 5 different reasons. Of, first, the fisherman killer, who we don't know who it is at this point, drops a cage on this podcaster who's like visiting the town to like research the the serial killing from the 1990s, so what happened to Julie and Ray. This podcaster here is to figure out like what happened, or like visiting the places that things occurred at. And her and Ava, the podcaster and Ava, are in one of these places. And then the fisherman appears and they're like running from the killer. But this giant cage drops from the ceiling and lands on Ava and just perfectly traps her in the cage. There's no bottom of the cage. Why the fisherman knew that he needed a cage put up there, I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense. How they knew that Ava would be standing right there, not moving, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Why the cage didn't have a bottom, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But he drops this cage on Ava, and then she like escapes from the cage. But when he's killing the podcaster, Ray, as the fisherman, I figured out it was Ray because when the fisherman holds up the podcaster and is about to kill her, she like takes off the mask, the fisherman mask, and sees that it's Ray. And the audience doesn't see this, but the dialogue or the script has the podcaster say, "It's you." And it's like, okay, well, the podcaster hasn't met any of the other characters. The only ones that she knows are Ray and Julie from her research. And you know it's not Julie. So it's like, okay, well, you know Ray's one of the killer or one of the killers, like very early on in the movie. So I just really didn't like that choice in general. I also don't think the reveal was done in a good way. So pretty weak overall. And then you find out that Stevie, one of the friends in the group, is the other killer, the other fisherman killer. And her reasoning for tracking them down and killing them is because the car accident that they were allegedly responsible for, even though that is a bit of a stretch too compared to the first movie. It was her boyfriend that, crashed off the edge and fell to his death. It was her boyfriend. So, because they killed her boyfriend, she wanted to track them down and kill them. But the issue is that prior to her knowing that it was her boyfriend, she also wanted to leave the scene, and she also didn't want to stay and talk to the police at the scene. She wanted to leave, and they tried to cover it up by saying, well, I thought we were going to the police station. But it's like, you also wanted to leave. You also were part of this hit and run in a way. So just the fact that, it happened to be her boyfriend after, to me doesn't really justify her actions or lead to enough motivation for her to become a killer either. So both of the killers, I think the motivations didn't make sense, and it really ruined the Ray character for me. And then Julie, I think as a character, just felt underdeveloped, and I don't think she did a whole lot in the film. I think she was involved for like advice and in many scenes, but didn't really move the story along that much. And then in the final scene, when Ray dies, you want Julie to be the one to kill Ray, where, okay, Ray's the killer. I don't agree with the decision, but he's the killer. Let's give him a good death. Let's have Julie kill him. No, that doesn't happen. Julie just kind of gets saved by Ava, who shoots Ray like in the side or the stomach with a harpoon gun. And there's no chase scene that, like, I know what you did last summer is kind of known for, is like the chase scenes from the first couple of movies. There's not really that many good chase scenes. And this death of Ray that could be like a really cool, iconic death, it's just kind of lame, like not very good at all. So I think Julie's involvement wasn't great. It looks like they're setting up a sequel with Julie still in it and the two main leads, but I just don't think that this movie was very good at all. So I know this was kind of all over the place, but there's a lot of things I didn't like about it. I'm sure there's more things I didn't like that I didn't even touch on, but ultimately I only gave this movie a 1.5 out of 5. So 1.5 out of 5. I will probably never watch watch this again. The original, I Know What You Did Last Summer, I gave it 2.5 out of 5. Where I was like, okay, it's like a fun enough watch. Like, I think it's slightly below average. It's definitely not as good as Scream. I don't think it's as good as Urban Legend either. I just didn't enjoy this one to a whole nother level, where the first one, the original, is like, okay, it's a decent watch. Like, I could see myself rewatching this maybe once every 5 to 10 years, or if there's a sequel coming out, I don't mind rewatching it. But this movie I just really didn't like, and I can't see myself watching it again. So, because of all the issues and the fact that I think they ruined Ray's character, and the fact that a lot of the character actions were dumb and didn't make sense, and the plot and script I think was weak, I just give it a 1.5 out of 5. So, not great, but those are my thoughts. So, I know I went a lot more in depth on this movie as well, which was actually the worst movie of the 3, but horror movies are what I, watch most of or get most invested in. And honestly, the other 2 movies I didn't want to get as into, because I think you should go watch F1 and Superman for yourself. I Know What You Did Last Summer, you do not need to see. I don't think there's a reason you should ever pay to watch this movie. If it comes out in streaming and you're like a horror movie buff, or you really like the original, like, you can watch it on streaming for free. But save your money. Don't watch this movie in theaters. So, alright, well, those are my thoughts on Superman, F1, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. So, I hope you enjoyed the gum chewing and the movie ramble. And if you've seen these movies, feel free to comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on them, because I love to get your feedback. Let me know if you've seen them, what you like or what you don't like about them. And then I'll be back with a more traditional ASMR video in the next day or 2. So, thanks. See ya.